Throughout history, the great Stoic philosophers mastered a technique to disarm their enemies from within, a method of operating from such an unbreakable posture of nobility and fortitude that none of the antagonist's attacks, deceptions, or hostilities could gain purchase. Today you will learn this technique and how to yield its incredible power over those who wish you harm. The technique is called the discipline of desire. Through razor-sharp reasoning and self-mastery, you subdue all internal cravings that can be exploited as weaknesses. You become immune to enemies' attempts to satiate their aggression by provoking anger, fear, status anxiety, or other deleterious longings inside you. With no vulnerability, no wound can be inflicted upon your spirit's indomitable will. The root of being affected by insults or cruel mocking is the ego's need for external praise and approval. But you become impervious when you eliminate this need for self-worth to come from others' opinions, good or bad. You know your own value already. It doesn't depend on being puffed up with compliments or torn down by harsh words. So when enemies launch outrageous slander campaigns and desperate efforts to insult you, you can observe it with curiosity, but remain unmoved internally. Their provocations have no target, no hook to latch into you. You don't require that external validation or condemnation to feel whole. As Epictetus said, if anyone tells you that such a person has spoken ill of you, do not make excuses about what has been said, but answer, he does not know my other faults, or he would not have mentioned only these. You accept yourself fully, flaws and all, so their mudslinging is irrelevant noise. It cannot shake or dent your grounded self-acceptance. You don't puff up at praise or deflate at insults. You sidestep that whole trap of ego that enemies try to manipulate. Rumors, hit pieces, and abuse have no sting because you take no actual self-worth from the world's meaningless judgments. You remain tranquil. Having a craving for money, property, and material wealth gives enemies a powerful lever to attempt extorting you and threatening financial ruin. But you become unshaken downable by eliminating this attachment to riches. You're unmoved by intimidation tactics like blackmail, theft, or credit smears because you place no fundamental value on the luxuries they're trying to hold for ransom. As Marcus Aurelius said, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Your sense of contentment and wholeness derives from richer virtues money cannot buy. Let enemies make outrageous demands, backed by threats to tank your assets, holdings, or income. You can calmly rebuff their extortion attempts because losing ephemeral riches means nothing to a soul unbounded from materialism. Their intimidation ploys fail to trigger fear, anxiety, or desperation. You'd sooner risk bankruptcy than violate your ethics for some monetary compensation. While opponents try to exploit your greed or dependence on luxury, you remain poised, securely detached from identifying with your net worth. Their highest stake shakedowns are impotent because you've alienated yourself from the societal illness of wealth lust. You're already freely enjoying the massively enriched life of the immortal and incorruptible spirit. Many enemies love targeting people's sensual addictions, bodily cravings, and hedonistic indulgences as leverage points to control. But you become immune to these vices' exploitation by stripping your animalistic urges down to a whisper. Let them bombard you with attempts at lurid temptation, waving delightful vices and earthly indulgences with leering grins. You'll remain as stoically unmoved as a statue observing candy, for you've extinguished the AD's thirst for physical cravings through rigorous discipline. As Seneca said, "The body is not a home but an inn, and philosophy does the work of preparing us for the journey out." Where opponents expect humans to be helplessly swayed by siren calls of lust, hedonism, or chemical escape, you've risen beyond those petty animalistic impulses. You register zero temptation from vice's empty promises because your inner garden is pristinely curated. Even the most tantalizing of sensual enticements cannot grow any lascivious vines. This elevates you to a plane of serene mastery over enemies who can only punch at the air, trying to trigger cravings that no longer exist inside you. Their tactics of deploying addictions, bodily gluttony, or moments of sybaritic rapture hit a dead end against your enlightened imperviousness. You happily keep right on flourishing. Those fixated on taking you down will always search for vulnerabilities to mercilessly upend, complex status symbols, possessions, accomplishments, or vanities for them to undermine or leverage against you. You immunize yourself through a radical embrace of simplicity. Your life is whittled down to an effortless mosaic of needs easily self-sufficed and contentments that cannot be bargained for. You've relinquished any taste for opulence or status embellishments that make bigger targets for rivals to sadistically destabilize. Let us get rid of the habit of fretting over what has been given us simply for use and temporary possession, reminds Seneca. Imagine the myriad frustrations for antagonists on unleashing their most devious, elaborate undoings and schemes, only to find a complete lack of vectors for their sabotage. You neither grasped for possessions to have seized nor positions to be toppled from. You exist as an admirably unassuming, self-contained ember, immune to their overcomplicated offensives. They cannot dethrone you when you've abdicated all thrones. You've eliminated every inch of extravagance or vanity that egoic's cravings could build convoluted contingencies around. What should be multi-pronged assaults awkwardly dissipate against your monk-like absence of exploits. Unadorned, you are impervious simply by existing without fuel for their flames. Adversaries love trying to unhinge people through abandonment or social isolation tactics, threatening to banish them from roles, relationships, and societal pillars that provide meaning. But you frustrate these manipulations by achieving a posture of invulnerable self-containment. You draw your sense of worth and fulfillment not from any precarious status or bond that enemies can sever, but from your internally integrated and sovereign self-possession. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed for everything to be unshakable, for the person who has formed the habit of discriminating between what is theirs and what is not theirs. Let them propagate desperate cancel culture snipings or try expelling you into isolation. You will remain unmoved and centered, for your core personhood is not contingent on hierarchies, identities, or connections that they can destabilize through abandonment. You possess a self-affirmed life, independent of roles and relationships they might strip away. You do not metabolize meaning through the unsteady mirrors of titles, vocations, or social regard that are forever at risk of confiscation. Others' approval or perception is not your existential oxygen. You embody a wholeness requiring no exterior validation or reflection. Thus, shunning and exiling gambits are toothless against your self-contained spirit. At their core, enemy operatives hope to corrupt your soul into a mutated echo of their own festering, hate-consumed selves. But you negate this outcome by radiating forth an infinite reservoir of benevolence, even unto those willfully malicious. Where antagonists seek to have you grow jaded, spiteful, and reactively inhumane, your intrinsic character resounds with unconquerable goodwill and empathic extension, even towards those attempting to brutalize you. As Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike the person who committed the injustice. Let their crucible of bitterness and persecution scorch all around you. They cannot corrupt you, nor transmute you into a hardened villain refracting their same brand of animosity outward, because immutable universal love and compassion flows forth from your essence toward all beings, even those declared as sworn enemies. No amount of hatred's battery or spite can degrade your spirit into its own soulless, inhumane progenitor. You simply cannot reverse alchemize into a disfigured umbra fueled by malice and vengeance, no matter how intensely their animosity blazes. An inexhaustible wellspring of empathy, kindness, and forgiveness keeps replenishing inside you. Adversaries will soon grow spiritually famished, attempting to starve your soul of the care, understanding, and warm wishes you extend back out, even unto them. Like a sun shower dissipating acid rain, your emotional generosity renders their worst ill intents impotent by transcending the cycle of transgressions. Those hurling contempt ultimately weary themselves against the unperturbable radiance of your persistent benevolence. You remain the living rebuke to hatred's self-perpetuating affliction, deflecting its poisons through a grounded hospitality even unto the hostile. Egotistical cravings for superiority, respect, and being seen as impressive are common insecurity levers that enemies attempt to vigorously trigger. You inoculate yourself through a truly integrated, unshakable humbleness, where the need to appear elevated over others dissolves completely. While rivals may mockingly try debasing you as inconsequential, a nobody, a failure, their chidings cannot strike any defensive vulnerability within you. You remain solidly unrocked, poised in the unadorned grace of equanimity among all fellow souls struggling along the humble path. As Epictetus reminded, seek not the good in external things. Seek it in yourselves, or you will never find it. With the ego's fixations for social clout and inflated self-importance extinguished, you have no delusions of grandeur or pettiness to puncture. You cannot be triggered into narcissistic rages or desperate overcompensations. From this rooted humility blooms a naturalness of being that transcends earthly constructs of status and hierarchy. Adversaries lose their prime leverage as you continually relinquish all residues of self-importance fantasies. You are neither superior nor inferior, just a humble student aiming to progress each day. Those bent on hostilities will inevitably play on your anxieties around social acceptance, being liked, fitting in, or people-pleasing vulnerabilities. But you disempower these manipulations completely by deleting the ego's craving for exterior validation. Let opponents turn entire friend groups against you, proliferate alienating gossip, and ostracize you from every circle. You will remain unaffected, solidly grounded in your self-assuredness, which takes no sustenance from the theater of mass opinion or being in others' perpetual graces. As Seneca wrote, "To be able to look another in the face with confidence and tranquility, this is the great reward." You have stifled the frantic, approval-addicted insecurities enemies typically leverage like puppet strings. You feel no inner famine for positive reception or social affirmation to feed your sense of self-worth. With exterior popularity and acceptance uncoupled from your core identity, those architects of bashings, exiles, defamations, and exclusions inevitably bankrupt themselves against your impenetrable centeredness. Their attempts to shame, embarrass, and make you acquiesce to malicious pressures via peer mechanisms fizzle against your tranquil imperviousness. Enemies love accumulating shameful ammunition or unflattering revelations to create public humiliation, hijacking their target's anguished concern for appearances or propriety. But you neuter these tactics by completely divorcing from all vanities of ego attachment. Let detractors gleefully unearth skeletons from unsavory pasts, perpetrating elaborate spectacles to mortify you in front of global audiences. Their shaming and provocations, designed to make you squirm self-consciously, will be met with your bemusement, not panic. For you have recognized self-importance as transparently hollow, an obvious spiritual usurper with no rightful place on your path. As Seneca preached, "There is no genius without keeping dignity in mind, so walk as befits the majesty of humankind." With no vanity remaining to protect or defend, enemies' attempts to maim your reputation or public persona simply land with a hollow inefficacy. There are no veneers or pedestals left for them to induce your faltering from. You feel no shudder of self-consciousness or loss of face when they maximize supposed scandals. Your grounded equanimity was achieved by dissolving all veils of pretentiousness and embracing the simple authenticity of your fears and flaws alike. Adversaries cannot embarrass what has already been integrated into wholeness with non-judgment. Their shaming have no power but to illuminate your sturdy naturalism. Investing energy into rigidly judging, separating the world into needless dualities of positive, negative, superior, inferior, makes your psyche vulnerable to feeling pained or overpowered. You sidestep this trap by radiating an open, uncalculated acceptance of all that emerges. As foes try goading you into egocentric judgments, you perceive each manifestation, including theirs, with the tranquil witness of an impartial observer, free from arbitrary prejudices. You avoid lending credence to their low-minded provocations by engaging in criticism or condemnation, rather than digesting their antics through lenses of good-bad, right-wrong, and other dualistic mind traps. You allow them to present exactly as they are without affixing biased identities. As Marcus Aurelius counseled, "Today is my renewal day. I hereby deem nothing as permitted to perpetrate upon my serenity. By stripping away egocentric impulses to categorize or conceptualize their characters positively or negatively, you sidestep the toxic engagements adversaries crave. There is just the continual witnessing of forms in their suchness, offering reactions no sustenance. Their chaos gets no shadow to keep dancing with. When you operate unbound by rigid expectations, contingencies or criteria for success, then enemies' attempts to hamstring or sabotage your efforts cannot gain any true purchase. You flow freely between states, unattached to needing specific results. Envision rivals' most devious machinations to disrupt or spoil your ambitions, undercutting plans, dismantling strategies, derailing key opportunities. Yet their intrigues ultimately fizzle against your permeating acceptance, causing no sustained frustration. As Marcus Aurelius taught, objective existence is simply this, where we are carried by the sovereign intelligence and by the circumventing revolving cycle of nature. You are not invested in forcing reality into preconceived boxes, but harmonizing with its unfolding waters. By embracing life as a fluid improvisational dance, rather than a ladder with defined checkpoints, you sidestep having leverage points that adversaries can use your own rigidity against you. There is no attachment to immovable outcomes that must be achieved, only the path of skillful responsiveness as each moment arises. From the limited ego's gaze, enemies may seem to be distinctly separate, pernicious forces cravenly arrayed against you. But you transcend this misconception by expanding into an elevated cosmic perspective that renders apparent conflicts as passing eddies in a greater unified flow. You consciously widen your circle of identification beyond the personal self's petty narratives and tribal allegiances. Your awareness begins encompassing the entire grand mosaic of existence, with all temporary permutations as brushstrokes in an ever-evolving masterwork. From this highest vantage, you see through the illusion of rigid dualities and oppositional frictions. Those currently antagonizing you are playing roles no more permanent or absolute than your own. All difficulties and seeming tribulations are ultimately recontextualized as harmonics in an ineffable symphony. As Marcus Aurelius realized, everything is interwoven and the web is holy. You no longer absorb or reify any enmities into cemented personal identities or irreconcilable external forces. All players are woven into an integrated, continually shape-shifting loom whose patterns engender no ultimate adversaries, only panoramic aesthetic unity. By rigorously applying the Stoic discipline of desire through the ways outlined above, you become uninvadable, an equanimous eye wall deflecting any howling enmities back upon themselves. Those sworn as adversaries inevitably surrender, for their weapons cannot possibly manufacture suffering from a mastered steeliness of spirit. You have alchemized your being into a state of supreme imperviousness, radiating a centered magnanimity that disintegrates opposition through its sheer imperturbability. Hostilities slide off like gentle breezes when the sovereign self cannot be coerced into reciprocating, uncompounded states. As Seneca taught, nothing deters a truly philosophical mind more than the crowd's approval. You stand not in combat but total unflappability, which is the supreme weapon of transcendence. Let enemies spin in their own self-obsessed conflicts as you express unfractured nobility and clarity. If you have made it this far, comment down below with the word 100% to confirm that you have received the knowledge from this video. For more interesting topics, make sure you watch the recommended video that you see on the screen right now. Thanks for watching.